One tool every former fat guy needs in their arsenal in the kitchen is a go-to protein chocolate cake recipe. When I said in my transformation video that I would eat an entire chocolate cake in one day and still hit my protein and calorie goals, I wasn't kidding. So today I'm going to show you that recipe. Let's get started. Welcome back to Former Fat Guy Fitness. For the protein chocolate cake recipe, we're going to start with getting the ingredients together, going over some replacements you could use in your ingredients, and then how to make the cake. So to get started, get everything together you need for just the cake itself. What you're going to need is 79 grams or a half cup of all-purpose flour, 13 grams or 1.5 tablespoons of cornstarch, 34 grams or 1 scoop of a chocolate whey casein protein powder, 40 grams or a half cup of cocoa, 5 grams or 1 teaspoon of baking soda, 3 grams or 1.5 teaspoons of espresso powder, 40 grams or 1.5 cups of a non-calorie sweetener, 139 grams or a quarter cup of egg whites, 120 milliliters or a half cup of fat-free Fairlife, and 185 grams or just over 3/4 of a cup of fat-free Greek yogurt. I'm using my homemade Greek yogurt as always. As you can see, I've already got all the ingredients weighed out. Don't want to waste your time, but a few notes on the ingredients that we're using. First and most importantly is your protein powder. The protein powder is the star of the show. Do not use regular whey protein. Use a whey casein blend. I'm not sponsored by PES Science, but this is hands down my favorite protein. It's great for baking. It has the best taste that I've found. So use a whey casein protein. Whey casein will retain the moisture better in a cake. And if you don't use a casein mixture, you're going to be making a brick, not a cake. So once again, emphasize whey casein protein. Do not use plain whey or you will be making a brick. Other than that, the cocoa you're using is also important. Since we're using baking soda, you need something with some acidity. Regular cocoa has that acidity. Now, if you have dark cocoa or Dutch cocoa, that's fine. Just switch out your baking soda with a baking powder. Also, if you don't have cornstarch, then you could use cake flour. The cornstarch basically just turns my all-purpose flour into a cake flour because I don't want to buy cake flour just to make my cakes. So I take all-purpose flour, mix it with cornstarch, boom, you've got cake flour. Other than the ingredients, you're going to need some basic equipment. You're going to want 2 bowls, one for dry ingredients, one for wet ingredients, and then to mix everything in when it's all done. You'll also need an 8-inch cake round. I specify 8-inch because if you use a bigger cake round, your cook times will be shorter. If you use a smaller cake round, your cook times are going to be longer. So I would really recommend an 8-inch cake round. Also, I use a little bit of parchment paper to line the bottom of the cake rounds. You will want some beaters, you will want a whisk, and you will want a spatula. And most importantly, I will say this in every video that I do, get yourself a food scale. 1 cup of flour could be 100 grams of flour, could be 140 grams of flour. 1 scoop of protein powder could be 20 grams of protein powder, could be 40 grams of protein powder. The numbers will vary enough that you need to use a scale. Because if you don't, and you're using just cups, tablespoons, scoops, you're going to be making a different recipe than me because the numbers aren't the same. So as always, if you need anything here, links are in the description below. It helps the channel out if you check them out. But what we're going to need to do to get started is take one of your smaller bowls here, and we're going to start by putting the dry ingredients in. So we'll start with the flour and the cornstarch, and we'll put that in the bowl. And then we're going to take our protein powder weighed out, and we're going to put that in the bowl. We'll take our cocoa and the espresso powder. We're going to mix that into the bowl. And then last but not least is we're going to take the baking soda and put that in. There's a reason why we're doing the dry and the wet ingredients separate. If you just put everything in, first off, things are going to get really lumpy. Then the baking soda will activate before you're ready to put things into the oven. The baking soda needs to be done at the time it's ready to go in the oven. So now that you have all the dry ingredients in the bowl, just take your whisk, and mix everything together to get all the lumps out. Once you have all your dry ingredients whisked together to get all those lumps out, we're going to move on to the wet ingredients. You'll notice that one dry ingredient we had wasn't in that bowl, and that's the sugar, the stevia that I'm using. Because that's going to mix in with the egg whites, it's going to mix in with the yogurt and the milk, and it's going to create a creamy mixture that we'll pour everything else into. So in your bowl, start with your 1.5 cups of stevia, sugar, whatever non-calorie sweetener you want to use. And then we're going to put in the yogurt. Once the yogurt's in there, we're going to take the egg whites, put those in, and then we're going to proceed to beat them. But only put in about half of the egg whites to start, and then start beating your mixture because you're trying to create a thicker batter here. So we'll start with about half of this. Take the beaters and start mixing it together. Once you got half the egg whites mixed in together with the sugar, take the rest of the egg whites, pour them in, and blend them up. After the egg whites, take your milk, pour it in, blend that up, and then we're going to switch from the beaters to the spatulas for a reason I'll show you in just a second here. All right, once all the liquid ingredients are mixed together, now we get on to the tricky part here. So take your dry ingredients, and you're only going to want to put in about 1/3 at a time. You're going to want to just kind of shake it out into your bowl. Like I said, you only want to put in about 1/3, maybe a half at a shot, and now you're going to switch to your spatula because you don't want to overwork that flour. If you do, the gluten in that will react and it will be a little firmer, like more of a bricky type cake. So now we're just going to take a spatula and just start mixing everything together lightly instead of overly mixing it with the beaters. So I'm going to do this with the dry ingredients in about a 3-step process. So here's phase number 2 of pouring it in. I've still got a little bit left over. And like I said, we're just taking our spatula and we're just folding everything in so the flour in the mixture doesn't overreact and it doesn't toughen up basically. Okay, now you'll notice that after 2 steps of doing that, this is starting to look a little bit more like a cake batter. So we're going to do it one more time, put the rest of the dry ingredients in, and then fold the rest of these in, and then we'll be ready for the oven. Once you finish folding your dry ingredients in 3 separate times, your batter should look about like that. It'll stay on the spatula, it'll drop off, but it's not going to be super runny. It's a cake batter. It's supposed to be thick. So the last thing to do is take a little nonstick spray, spray it along the sides. You don't want to go too much because yes, I know there's a little bit of calories in a nonstick spray. As long as everything's good and coated though, you'll be good. You don't want your cake to stick to your pan. So we'll take the cake batter and we are going to just pour this in here, and then we will get ready to throw this in the oven, and I will tell you how to test to see if your cake is done. Once you've got everything in the cake round, we're going to take our oven at 350. We're going to pop the cake in the middle rack, and you're going to leave it in there for 20 minutes, at least 20 minutes, but it usually bakes for about 25. But do not open this oven for 20 minutes. You need to maintain the heat so the baking soda will let everything rise and it won't fall flat on you. So once you come back in about 20 minutes, you're going to want to do the toothpick test. Take a toothpick, put it in the middle of the cake, and pull it out. If it comes out clean, it's ready, it's done, pull it out, let it cool. If it comes out with crumbs on it, then it's not quite ready. Give it another 3 to 5 minutes. On the cake though, you're going to want to go on the underside of done. You go too far, the protein powders and everything will get too dry. So it's better to have an underdone cake than an overdone cake. But while this thing's doing its thing for about 20 to 25 minutes here, I'm going to get the frosting ready. So let's do that. Now the frosting is way easier than the cake itself. The only things you're going to need to make your protein frosting are 34 grams or a half cup of sugar-free whipped cream, 2 grams or a capful of vanilla extract, 240 milliliters or 1 cup of fat-free Fairlife, 23 grams or 2/3 of a scoop of vanilla protein, 33 grams or a full package of sugar-free vanilla pudding. For the protein powder on this one, you could use whatever protein powder you want. It doesn't need to be a whey casein, it's not going to get baked, but I still use the PES Science protein. All you have to do for this one is take your pudding, put it in the bowl, take your protein powder, put it in the bowl, take your whipped cream, put it in the bowl, take the milk, put it in the bowl, and then do the same with the vanilla extract. Then you grab your beaters and you beat it. All right, once that's done, you'll notice that it's basically just a very thick pudding. That's what you made. You just take a thick pudding, and this is what will become your frosting. So let's check on the cake in the oven here, see how it's doing. Okay, so it was in for about 25 minutes at 350. I'm gonna do the toothpick test real quick. Pop this guy in and all the way to the bottom, pull it out. And there is still a little bit of chocolate on there, a little bit of moisture, but not that many crumbs. And on a protein chocolate cake, I would much rather it be underdone than overdone. The line between cake and brick is very thin on protein chocolate cakes. So I'm gonna let this sit. It needs to cool for about 10 minutes before we remove it from the pan and get it frosted. Once we get that done, we'll get it frosted and then we'll go over the macros. There you go, a moist protein chocolate cake, just like that. When I say I could eat this entire cake in one day and still hit my calorie and protein goals, I wasn't kidding. For one slice with the frosting, you got 142 calories, 24.4 grams of carbs, 1.3 grams of fat, and 13.5 grams of protein. So if you need yourself a sweet treat to keep on hand, make this. If you do and you like it, hit the like button. If you have any other ideas for some low-calorie, high-protein desserts you'd like to see, leave them in the comments. If you want to help the channel out or you want to see more out of me, hit the subscribe button. In the meantime, I've got some lunch to have.